See, mine is not the first offering, nor the most elegant. I'm afraid I obtained those from an obliging field.
And I've always preferred wildflowers.
I suspected as much.
Who is John Willoughby? A romantic hero gone rogue? A tragic figure caught in his own web? Or just a very handsome cautionary tale in breeches? In this video, I'm going to deep dive into the heart and perhaps the wallet of Sense and Sensibility's most divisive character. Spoiler alert, there will be sighing and possibly slapping. Emotionally, at least. Now, I'll admit I'm temperamentally more Jane Bennet than Elizabeth. I want to believe the best in people, and I tend to think circumstance, not character, is often to blame, and that's why I'm torn on John Willoughby. I believe, for a moment at least, that in meeting Marianne, he stood at a crossroads, a chance to become better. But Austen reminds us, past actions echo, and Willoughby's damage had already been done. Willoughby is a man who walks into Sense and Sensibility like a Byron poem, that got up early, put on a top hat, and decided to wreak havoc on every tender heart within a 10-mile radius.
But when will you come back?
Soon. Very soon.
Now, if Edward Ferrars is the moral conundrum in a cardigan, Willoughby is the scandal in a waistcoat, the character who strides into the story with a horse, a backstory, and enough charm to make Marianne Dashwood forget how books end. But unlike Marianne, who at least believes in her emotional purity, Willoughby performs statesman, performs sentiment. He mastered the art of feeling for effect rather than principle. There is a performative quality in his action, an almost theatrical desire to be adored. And in Austen's world, this is not just vanity, it's social hazard. He is without doubt the designated rake of the piece. But what's so fascinating, what makes him more than a cardboard villain, is the fact that for one hot second we think he might not be. There's vulnerability in the man, regret, even affection. Yet when he meets Marianne, his past does not seem to weigh upon him. He acts with instinctive kindness, not like a rake or libertine, but like a man with a conscience.
Can you put your arm about my neck? Allow me to escort you home.
He arrives in the story in the way many literary rogues do, dramatically on horseback, at the precise moment the heroine needs rescuing. But this isn't just Austen's romantic flourish, it's her setting the stage for a man who plays the part of a hero with unnerving ease. That's Willoughby. Charm without character, poetry without principle. By the time he meets Marianne, he's already got a scandal under his belt, a seduction, an abandonment, a pregnancy. He doesn't ride in from a clean slate, but from a messy past, cloaked in charm. The dramatic rescue of Marianne isn't love at first sight, it's simply a decent act, an instinctive, arguably chivalrous moment.
Are you hurt? Don't move, stay there, I'll come to you.
A man helping a young woman in pain, and for once, not about him. So yes, he plays the lover, but he also plays a man whom emotion is currency and whose affection can easily be retracted as easily as it's given. And this is the paradox of Willoughby. Sincere and selfish, passionate and cowardly, romantic yet ruinous. In unpacking his role in Sense and Sensibility, we're not just exposing a cad, we're watching Austen dismantle the entire idea of charm as virtue. It starts innocently enough, a walk in the rain, a twisted ankle, and the sudden appearance of a stranger, handsome, articulate, and heroically helpful. This is Willoughby's dramatic entrance into the Dashwoods world, and Austen ensures it reads like something out of a Gothic novel, just without the ghost. Crucially, there's no seduction in this first moment, no ulterior motive, no calculated move. Willoughby simply sees a young woman injured and offers immediate aid. It's a gallant, unscripted action, the kind of scene that earns trust before words are even exchanged. And that's important. Austen wants us to like him. She wants Marianne to like him. And she wants us to understand just how easy it is to be swept away. What follows, of course, is a rapid courtship marked by shared passions and poetic declarations. Willoughby and Marianne find in each other an emotional mirror. They discuss Cowper and Shakespeare with abandon. They laugh at decorum. They dismiss Eleanor's steady caution as dull pragmatism. And yes, the infamous horse gift scene, Queen Mab. He offers it to Marianne with no concern for how it might look or how improper it is. It's not just romantic, it's extravagant, scandalous, presumptive, and incredibly revealing. It shows how Willoughby operates, feeling first, thinking later, if at all. Eleanor, ever the quiet analyst, knows exactly what it means and urges her sister not to accept.
But Marianne cannot possibly accept such a gift.
Eleanor, why ever not?
For reasons both of practicality and propriety.
So why do we fall for it? Why does Marianne? Because Austen builds this romance on recognised emotions. The early days of infatuation feel real, and for all his flaws, Willoughby does feel something for Marianne. He's not lying when he speaks of love, and he's the sort of man who believes that feeling something deeply is enough to justify anything, however reckless, however cruel. Willoughby is not yet the villain. He is the idea of love without discipline, the intoxication of sensibility without any of its moral weight. And that is where the seeds of destruction are sown, amid poetry and soft glances, long before any letter arrives or any secrets come to light. In Sense and Sensibility, Austen gives us a protagonist in disguise. Willoughby appears charming, gallant, and romantic, but these are not fixed truths. They're reflections shaped and reshaped by the characters around him. If we want to understand the man beneath the persona, we also need to look at how others respond to him and what they eventually reveal. Eleanor Dashwood, the skeptic with sense. Eleanor is the first to see past the surface. Though she is never openly antagonistic, she is also never truly convinced by Willoughby's performance.
You've covered Shakespeare, Scott, all forms of poetry. Another meeting will ascertain his views on nature and romantic attachments, and then you will have nothing left to talk about, and the relationship will be over.
While Marianne falls headlong into infatuation, Eleanor maintains a quiet reserve. Early in the novel, she notes Willoughby's eagerness and spirited manner, but remains uneasy about the speed and intimacy of his attentions. This is especially clear when Willoughby offers Marianne a horse, an act Eleanor views not only as inappropriate but presumptuous. Her discomfort suggests a more mature awareness of social conventions and personal boundaries. It's not just that Willoughby moves too fast, it's that he doesn't respect the rules that protect others from disappointment or disgrace. In the 1995 film, Emma Thompson's Eleanor gives subtle loaded glances during Willoughby's scenes with Marianne, glimpses that show a mind always working, questioning, withholding judgment. And this is Austen's point. Eleanor isn't dazzled, and she watches. Colonel Brandon, the unspoken rival. Colonel Brandon's initial discomfort around Willoughby isn't grounded in knowledge of past sins. It's more instinctive, a quiet observation that something in Willoughby's nature doesn't sit right.
What are your intentions towards Miss Marianne Dashwood?
I beg your pardon?
I believe you heard me.
In fact, Brandon has no idea of the scandal involving Eliza until much later in the novel, but from early on, he sees something in Willoughby that others don't or won't. What we see in Brandon is a man who senses he's being eclipsed. His feelings for Marianne are sincere, but he cannot compete with Willoughby's youthful charm and shared tastes.
The man himself. Come, Brandon, we know when we are not wanted. Let us leave him to the ladies.
And so rather than interfere, he withdraws. He watches, he waits. There's restraint, but not rivalry. It's only after Brandon receives news of Eliza's downfall that Willoughby's true nature becomes clear. The letter informing him of her seduction and abandonment is the catalyst. That's when Brandon rushes away, his silence finally broken by outrage and not jealousy. It's then that his honour becomes action. In the 2008 adaptation, this is rendered brilliantly. David Morris sees Brandon, usually reserved and stoic, suddenly becomes animated, driven. The urgency with which he leaves, and later his cool, direct confrontation with Eleanor, mark the shift from unease to moral clarity. Mrs. Jennings and the social lens. Mrs. Jennings is a bit of a red herring in the Willoughby narrative. She talks a lot, but doesn't know much. Her boisterous matchmaking and incessant teasing about Marianne and Willoughby give their relationship a veneer of inevitability. She reads flirtation as engagement, passion as permanence. But in truth, Mrs. Jennings is a narrative device Austen uses to highlight how society often assumes romantic outcome based on surface-level chemistry. Her hearty endorsement of Willoughby isn't rooted in character analysis, it's driven by romantic idealism and wishful gossip.
Well, I'll wager that's the last we'll see of them for an hour or two.
She's projecting a fairy tale onto two attractive young people. Her lack of deeper insight into Willoughby's true nature mirrors how easily public opinion can be swayed by appearances. That said, she's also instrumental in revealing how little anyone really knows about him, despite their confidence. Mrs. Jennings' assumptions create pressure, which Marianne never encounters, and Eleanor fully challenges until it's too late. Mrs. Smith, the silent judge. Though she doesn't appear directly, Mrs. Smith has immense narrative power. As Willoughby's wealthy relative and benefactor, she is a gatekeeper to his future. Her decision to disinherit him once she learns of his past with Eliza is not just a moral judgment, it's a financial reckoning. It's here that Austen's realism sharpens. Willoughby's fall isn't theatrical, it's economic. His options narrow and his excuses run out. Mrs. Smith never speaks directly in the novel, but her presence is decisive. She is in effect the novel's quiet moral compass, invisible but unsparing. This adds a layer of discomfort. Willoughby is not without regrets, but by the time it comes, it's too late. Mrs. Smith is therefore the grand puppet master with no lines. She's like a shadow cast across Willoughby's future. Her presence is more powerful for being offstage. We never meet her directly, yet her judgment, disinheriting Willoughby when she learns of his seduction and abandonment of Eliza, alters the entire course of the story. It's her values that ultimately force Willoughby to choose money over love. And it's through her that Austen injects a moral reckoning. Her power is twofold. She acts as a moral benchmark. Willoughby's secret must remain hidden from her, or he loses everything. She becomes an ironic echo of Austen's commentary on wealth and virtue. It's not a judge or court that punishes Willoughby, it's a rich elderly relative with a conscience. Her values matter more than his passion. Without Mrs. Smith, Willoughby and Marianne might well have married, so she may be invisible, but she's also inevitable. Sir John Middleton. Sir John Middleton is warm-hearted, generous and affable, but when it comes to Willoughby, he's entirely incurious. He admires Willoughby immensely, even expressing delight at receiving a dog from him, an apparently generous gesture that says more about charm than substance. And what's revealing is that Sir John cannot provide the Dashwood women with any meaningful information about Willoughby's background. Pressed for details, he offers nothing concrete, no knowledge of his fortune, his connections, or his character, and yet he remains entirely convinced of Willoughby's merit.
Decent shot. There's not a bolder rider in all England.
But what is he like?
Like?
What are his tastes, his passions, his pursuits?
This blind admiration speaks volumes. Sir John is representative of society eager to be pleased, willing to mistake charisma for integrity. His easy endorsement of Willoughby highlights the way surface impressions can eclipse real scrutiny. And Willoughby doesn't have to prove anything to be well liked. He just has to perform well enough to charm his audience. Together, what they reveal. Across the perspectives of these varied characters, we build a complex, contradictory portrait of John Willoughby, not as he is, but as he appears. Austen never gives us direct access to Willoughby's inner thoughts until much later. Instead, she lets us assemble him from the impressions and assumptions of others. To Marianne, he is the perfect romantic hero, passionate, poetic, spontaneous. Her love doesn't just obscure his flaws, it renders them invisible. To Eleanor, he is suspicious from the outset, precisely because he seems too good to be true. Her rational skepticism stands in contrast to Marianne's rapture, but even Eleanor lacks the full picture. To Colonel Brandon, Willoughby is both a rival and a warning sign, a charming predator in gentleman's clothing, whose private actions betray his public polish. To Mrs. Dashwood, he is a dream come true for her daughter, until he's not. Her maternal hopefulness blinds her to the red flags. To Sir John Middleton and Mrs. Jennings, he's nothing short of delightful, friendly, sociable, generous, at least on the surface. Their opinions are based on charisma, not character. And to Mrs. Smith, he's a moral failure. A man who can seduce and abandon a girl, then lie about it, is no heir of hers, regardless of his charm. Each observer reveals a different facet of Willoughby's social performance. He is not consistent, but he is convincing. His ability to charm, adapt, and obscure is almost the point. He doesn't get found out because he's wicked. He gets found out because the performance eventually collapses under the weight of truth. Austen's genius lies in how she builds Willoughby's downfall, not through a dramatic revelation, but through the gradual unravelling of perception. As each character's understanding shifts, so does ours. He's not a villain with a top hat and moustache. He's something more insidious. A man who could have done better, should have done better, and simply chose not to. The past doesn't stay buried, not in Austen's world, and certainly not in Willoughby's. The cracks appear. Up to this point in Sense and Sensibility, Willoughby has glided through the narrative with all the elegance of a Regency ballroom lead. His flirtations with Marianne, his literary tastes, his quick wit, all of it has made him not only likeable but dazzling. Even when he disappears from Devonshire with suspicious abruptness, there's still the benefit of the doubt. But now we see the beginning of the crucial shift. The audience stops trusting Willoughby because the novel stops protecting him. That shift begins with Brandon's sudden and urgent departure from Barton Park, an unexpected exit prompted by a mysterious letter. The adaptations rendered this moment visually. A rider arrives bearing a message, and Brandon departs hastily, leaving no explanation. The social plans are put aside, and a noticeable tension enters the narrative. It's the moment Willoughby's story stops being romantic and starts becoming tragic. Tragic not for him, but for the women he's harmed. From here on, charm becomes camouflage. Eliza's story, Austen's silenced victim. Eliza is a name that echoes twice in the novel. The first Eliza is Brandon's youthful love, pressured into a loveless marriage and ultimately ruined. Her daughter, Eliza II, Eliza II, becomes his ward, and her story heartbreakingly mirrors her mother's fate. That repetition isn't accidental. Austen is deliberately showing us a cycle of exploitation. Women without power, men with too much of it, and society standing by. Elizabeth Williams' ordeal isn't shown directly. Austen gives us no sentimental description of her suffering, no melodrama. She's off stage, mentioned in conversation, confined to Brandon's report. But this narrative distance only intensifies the effect. She becomes a ghost in the novel, hovering, haunting, and representing every woman whose story was quietly erased after being ruined. And crucially, her story reframes Willoughby. He is no longer merely the dashing object of Marianne's affection. He's now the man who left a pregnant teenager to face disgrace alone. It's not a lapse of judgment, it's a revelation of character, and the consequences ripple through every relationship we've seen so far. Jane Austen, in her restraint, invites us to reckon with the brutal normality of what's happened. In a society that places a woman's entire future on her chastity, seduction is not just immoral, it's annihilating, and Willoughby knew that. Brandon's response, the duel of honour. The revelation about Eliza is Brandon's breaking point. Until now, he's been a figure of quiet reserve. But what Willoughby has done to a vulnerable young woman, and to someone Brandon feels deeply responsible for, ignites a rare fury. He confronts Willoughby, not with words, but through a formal challenge. Austen offers just a glimpse. We met by appointment. He to defend, I to punish his conduct. This instinct to defend honour, particularly in matters of seduction and ruin, was not isolated to Sense and Sensibility. Remember, in Pride and Prejudice, Mrs. Bennet fears her husband might duel Wickham when he rushes off to London, after Lydia's elopement, crying out,
And now here is Mr. Bennet gone away. And I know he will fight Wickham, and then he will be killed, and then what is to become of us all?
Though Austen never dramatises these duels, she acknowledges their place in the moral economy of her time. The very mention of them, cloaked in worry, spoken in drawing rooms, reveals how deeply intertwined male honour and violence could be, even in her polite society. Brandon's challenge to Willoughby belongs to this same unspoken code. It is clear that Brandon initiated the meeting, whether with pistols or swords, Austen never tells us. What matters isn't the manner, but the meaning. Brandon felt compelled to act, not out of jealousy, but as a man of honour responding to a moral crime. Austen's choice to keep the details minimal reflects her style. The consequences matter more than the theatrics. The confrontation lingers in the background as a silent marker of Willoughby's disgrace and Brandon's resolve. And in doing so, he casts Willoughby in a new light. If Brandon is willing to fight a duel to defend Eliza, what does that say about the severity of Willoughby's actions? Austen doesn't need to describe the duel in full because its emotional and moral impact is already thunderous. Willoughby's image fractures. Until now, Willoughby has operated in a kind of narrative shadow. He's withheld explanations, made himself scarce, let others fill in the blanks. The shadow gave him the power, but Eliza's story and Brandon's duel drag him into the light. The result is unsettling. Suddenly every early scene is recontextualized. The charming visit to Alum tainted. His poetic sighs over Cowper emptied of sincerity. His reluctance to speak plainly now reads as evasion. It also reframes his feelings for Marianne. Was it real love? Was it just repeating a pattern? Can a man who devastates one woman truly cherish another? Austen never offers a clean answer, but she does make us ask the questions. And in doing so, she subtly changes the audience's own capacity for romantic blindness. From this point on, Willoughby ceases to be the hero in waiting. He's not misunderstood. He's not merely unlucky. He's a man who has done serious harm and has only started to realise it too late. Conclusion: ghosts and consequences. What's so important is it's not just the revelation of Willoughby's past, it's how that past reshapes everything. Eliza, though voiceless, becomes the hinge of the story. She forces characters and readers to reckon with who Willoughby really is. The duel isn't about spectacle, it's about moral clarity. It's the rupture in the polite surface of Austen's world, and it asks, what does honour really look like when society protects the wrong person? And Willoughby? His downfall isn't just about social exclusion or lost love. It's about the consequences finally catching up to a man who's coasted on charm, excuses, and indulgence of others. In the end, he's not left punished, but diminished. And maybe that's Austen's most powerful twist. She doesn't need to destroy him. She just needs to show us who he is. Austen's tone and social structure are subtle regarding attachments and courtship. In Regency society, a young woman's public attachment to a man who then vanishes could damage her social standing if it had gone far enough to imply impropriety, for instance, being alone together, letters, gifts, etc. Willoughby did behave in ways that could have led to suspicion. He was constantly in her company, received a lock of her hair, which was significant, and made no formal declaration. Eleanor and Mrs. Dashwood are worried, not about scandal per se, but about heartbreak and social awkwardness. They sense the imbalance and realise things could be read poorly. So by the time Willoughby has been several weeks in the Dashwood sisters' company, everything points towards a match. He has made himself perfectly agreeable, not just to Marianne, who positively glows in his presence, but also to Mrs. Dashwood, who sees in him both romantic sensibility and financial promise. Even Margaret, the youngest Dashwood, begins to speak of when Marianne and Mr. Willoughby are married, with the innocent confidence only a child can muster. Austen gives us no official betrothal scene, because there isn't one. But the atmosphere surrounding their time together at Barton is weighed with expectations.
Why do they not announce their engagement? Everything about their conduct suggests that they are engaged in private, so why do they not make it public?
I know they're engaged.
In Regency society, to accept a lock of hair from a woman was not only deeply personal, it was suggestive of a serious commitment, and yet he makes no formal offer. Hope, denial, and appearances. It's easy to forget just how long the family clings to the belief that the proposal has already been made, or that it's at least imminent. Eleanor, always cautious, is not so sure, but even she admits that everything declared they were engaged. Mrs. Dashwood is more confident. Of course they are engaged, Eleanor. And Marianne herself? She is not openly boastful, but neither does she correct the assumptions. In her eyes, the understanding was mutual. What need was there for a formal proposal when their hearts had already declared themselves? This, of course, is the great irony of the novel's title. Marianne has sense enough to believe in her own emotional experience, but not the caution, or perhaps the cynicism, to demand clarity in words. A mirror image of departure. Willoughby's sudden exit leaves behind a very different kind of silence. Marianne becomes withdrawn, physically ill at times, and obsessively defensive of his character. The reader, like Eleanor, is left to piece together what's happened through what isn't said. Willoughby doesn't write. Marianne writes to him in London. The weeks pass and no response comes. Here, Austen draws a striking parallel for those paying attention. At the very start of the novel, another woman, Eliza, was also abandoned by Willoughby, also left with silence in place of a promise. It's not hard to imagine her standing at the window just as Marianne does later. The difference is that Marianne's circumstances are now remain salvageable, but the shadow is unmistakable. The proposal that lived only in hope. So what really happened? Austen doesn't spell it out, but the signs are all there. Willoughby courted Marianne with every gesture of a man in love, but either lacked the courage to make it official or was already wavering due to the financial pressures hanging over him. his wealthy cousin, Mrs. Smith, may have caught wind of his earlier conduct with Eliza, or simply disapproved of Marianne's lack of fortune. Whatever the cause, Willoughby chose to leave rather than commit, and he did so without offering Marianne or her family so much as the dignity of the truth. This isn't just a failed romance. It's the moment when Willoughby begins to transform in the reader's eyes from a misunderstood hero to something far more morally ambiguous. And for Marianne, it marks the beginning of a heartbreak that will change not just her emotions, but her very principles. When Willoughby arrives at Cleveland, he arrives with regret. He's not there to reclaim Marianne with a grand romantic gesture. That time has passed, and he knows it. What he brings instead is something far messier, more human and less useful, an overwhelming desire to be understood. And it's Eleanor, practical, reserved, emotionally bruised Eleanor, who becomes the unexpected confidant of a man she has every reason to despise.
Miss Dashwood.
Excuse me, I have no time for this.
Please, wait. I want to explain. I want to apologise.
And it's a brilliant move by Austen. In placing Eleanor and Willoughby face to face, she gives us the confrontation we didn't know we needed. Not between lovers, but between opposites, between the man who represents emotional recklessness and the woman who has tried so hard to master it. But let's be clear, Willoughby doesn't show up out of the blue because he's had a sudden crisis of conscience. He comes because he's haunted. He's heard that Marianne is gravely ill, and it shakes him, maybe for the first time. He can no longer compartmentalise what he's done. And so, like a man trying to outrun his own reputation, he appears not to offer healing, but to unburden himself. The shape of confession. Willoughby's confession isn't elegant. It's not crafted for maximum sympathy. It's disjointed, full of contradictions and self-pity, of what might generously be called moral detours. He paints himself as weak, as misunderstood.
But against my will, I fell genuinely in love with her and made up my mind to marry her.
As a victim of his own poor judgment and society's harsh expectations. And in doing so, he reveals more than he intends. He doesn't take full responsibility, not really. He lays out his sins, the seduction and abandonment of Colonel Brandon's ward, the cowardice in London, the marriage to Miss Grey, but always with a caveat. I was young. I was desperate. I didn't realise. I had no choice. It's a symphony of excuses, but here's the brilliance. It doesn't read as manipulative. It reads as human, because we've all known someone like Willoughby, someone who's charming and reckless and full of bright potential, but who just keeps folding under pressure, making the selfish choice and calling it fate.
So now do you pity me, Miss Dashwood? Or have I said all this to no purpose?
This is a man who thought he could get away with everything and now finds himself standing ankle deep in consequences. Tell her I am not married. One of the most raw moments in the entire confession comes when Willoughby insists Eleanor tell Marianne that he didn't marry for love, that for all his betrayal, he didn't choose Miss Grey over Marianne. But Austen isn't letting him off the hook. She shows us what's really going on. This is a man who still wants to be loved, not by Miss Grey, who holds the purse strings, but by Marianne, the one person who once believed in him without condition. And the truth he cannot say aloud, but which rings loudly between the lines, is this: he chose money over love, and now he's stuck with that choice. Was he in love? It's tempting to try to solve this like a logic puzzle. Did he love her or not? But Austen isn't writing a ledger of emotional transactions. She's writing people, and people are messy. So yes, Willoughby did love Marianne in the way that someone like him could love, passionately, sincerely, in the moment. But that's just it. His feelings were momentary, his instincts undisciplined. He lacked the moral spine to choose love when it required sacrifice. His love was sincere in feeling, but not in action. And Austen, more than any other novelist of her time, understands the difference. It's not enough to feel deeply. Love must be tested by time, by character, by hardship. And when it came to that test, Willoughby simply failed. He loved her, just not enough to ruin himself over her, and not enough to be honest, not enough to defy society or face the consequences of his own behaviour.
You had my sister's love, and now you have lost it forever.
He loved his comfort more, and that, Austen tells us, without a drop of sentimentality, is not the kind of love that lasts. The downfall is himself. So in many ways, Willoughby is the architect of his own downfall. His choices catch up with him, not just the scandal with Eliza, but the refusal to be clear with Marianne, the deception of appearances, the seduction of wealth over principle. What's so quietly devastating about this scene is that he knows it. He's not asking for forgiveness, not really. What he wants is absolution, or at least acknowledgement that he's not as bad as the facts suggest. Austen writes people with flaws big enough to ruin themselves. Willoughby is selfish, vain, impulsive, but not monstrous, which is why he still evokes some sympathy, because we see the alternative path he might have taken. He sees it too, and that's the tragedy. His confession is not absolution. Eleanor grants him no great forgiveness, but she listens. And in doing so, she lets us listen, long enough to see that Willoughby, for his charm, is just another man who couldn't live up to the promise he pretended to be. She never lets him believe he's innocent because he isn't. And what's more, he knows he isn't. That's the final blow. The mirror has cracked, and for the first time, Willoughby sees the full shape of what he gave up. The ghost in the ending. Willoughby exits the novel as a ghost, present only in memory. Austen never gives him a final scene with Marianne, and rightly so, although the 1995 film does show him on horseback watching the wedding scene unfold in the village below him. Perhaps this was Emma Thompson's way of showing a man wrecked with regret. Willoughby's confession isn't for Marianne, it's for us the readers, and perhaps for Eleanor, who can bear witness without being taken in. Marianne, for her part, doesn't speak to him. She never hears his confession, and she doesn't need to, because the Willoughby she mourned, the one she nearly died loving, wasn't real. He was a fiction and imagination and fantasy she had outgrown. And to me, this speaks of a Marianne still full of sensibility and finally maturing. Perhaps, like her mother before her, the sting of this experience potentially shaping her future emotions. But you can look at Marianne in her own dedicated video when I get round to that. The confession at Cleveland is not Willoughby's redemption, it's his reckoning. And so in true Austen form, it doesn't offer melodrama or absolution, just a painfully human glimpse into what happens when charm fails, truth arrives late, and a man realises that the thing he let go might have been the only thing worth keeping. A recap with purpose. When I was introduced to Sense and Sensibility, I gave Willoughby a fair bit of rope. He seemed like one of those tragic romantic figures, flawed but still feeling things deeply, torn between passion and duty. His heartbreak looked real. His regret sounded convincing, and it was very easy to believe that he meant well. But coming back to him now through this analysis, that initial impression that I perceived doesn't hold, not quite. The charm feels strategic and the regret feels performative. Willoughby is someone who wants to be seen as better than he behaves. And Austen, well, she lets us sit with that discomfort. She doesn't offer a clean moral, no punishment, no redemption. He just exists, half-formed, unresolved, like so many people we half-trusted, half-misread, but never really figured out. Austen's design. And this is where Austen's brilliance lies, not in judging Willoughby, but in revealing him. She doesn't need melodrama. She simply sets him among better people and lets the contrast do the work. Eleanor's restraint, Marianne's openness, Mrs. Dashwood's romantic hopefulness, each of them is affected by him deeply, but each also survives him. Austen uses Willoughby like a lens, reflecting different aspects of emotional growth through the people he wounds. He doesn't destroy anyone, he just fails to elevate anyone, including himself. There's no big scene where he's cast out or made to grovel. That would be too easy. Instead, he's left behind untidy and unheroic, just a man whose choices shrink him. It is, I believe, part of Jane Austen's writing style. The page seems to be left blank for us, the reader, or the viewer, if you're following along on the big screen, to draw our own conclusions. The lessons, soft but real. There are lessons here, lessons drawn from the whole Willoughby fiasco. Marianne learns not to surrender everything to feeling.
Do you compare your conduct with his?
No. I compare it with what it ought to have been. I compare it with yours.
Eleanor learns that emotional discipline is noble, yes, but connection matters too. Even Mrs. Dashwood, so eager for romance and rescue, comes to recognise that admiration and character aren't the same thing. They all take something from their encounter with Willoughby. They move on, they mature. But Willoughby, he doesn't change. Or rather, he changes too late. That's his tragedy. Not that he was evil, that he could have been good and wasn't. That he loved someone and let the love die of cowardice. That he knows what he lost and still can't fix it. And this is Austen's fitting end for Willoughby. She makes him live with himself. The final beat. And maybe that's the deeper cut. He's something much harder to forgive. A man who could have been better and wasn't. Austen never writes him again. She doesn't have to. Perhaps Austen's warnings are the life lessons. Maybe we don't always need therapy. Maybe we just need to read a Jane Austen novel and apply the caution where it counts. No, let's not go there. So that's it for me from now. Thank you for watching, and if you did, drop a comment. I really do appreciate this community that's building, because I read your comments and I do reply when I'm able to. Obviously, if you comment something that answers itself and it's clearly justified statement, it won't need a response, but I'll definitely give it a heart. Please consider giving this video a like if you found it interesting. All the engagement helps my channel grow, and now with over 23,000 subscribers, I'm left wondering where all the other Jane Austen fans are, because, I want to knock on their door. We need to expand the range so the audience can grow, and you can help me with a like. I'll see you in the next one. 4 more characters to go. Bye for now.